All right, I'm here with Chris Johnson, No Limit Squad, and I'd like to be an honorary member of the No Limit Squad. It's kind of like it's a sick little, yeah, it's a sick name. I love that. I think I knew about isometrics initially, and I'm not going to pigeonhole you, but that's definitely your stick. And I think it's awesome that you're doing that. I actually see a lot of similarities in kind of your channel and kind of stuff I'm talking about. I mean, surfer get a little niche area, but I think niche areas in YouTube are cool. I think that's what makes YouTube unique is finding those kind of unique little avenues and people that are focusing on certain areas. So I know you're definitely a veteran trainer. You got a lot of knowledge in health and fitness in general. So I know you have a lot more to offer than just isometrics. I think I initially heard about you from my friend Stevie Richards, which I don't know if you ever talked to him or not, but he was telling me, and this is a long intro, so I'm sorry, but he was telling me that when he came recovered from his surgery and stuff, he was using isometrics. I'm like, I know isometrics is cool, but I was like, you look pretty good for just using isometrics. And I was like, then I looked at it a little more. Then I saw your stuff, and I'm sure Stevie saw your stuff too. That led him out of the ISO chain, ISO max. So how did you basically discover isometrics? I guess initially, and just a little bit about yourself and your channel.
Sure, Mike. So I discovered isometrics in 2017. I was just curious on how to get some of my lifts a little bit, I guess, better. And at the time, I was weighing around 165, and I started to delve down the rabbit hole of being pound for pound strong. And so, of course, that's going to lead to stuff like Bruce Lee being 135 and able to launch people across the room, Alexander Zass and other freaks of nature like that. And so I'm just like, okay, well, it seems to be that they have like this one thing in common, which is using isometric training. And, at that point, all I really knew about isometrics was that they were just holds. So like everybody pretty much knows like what the wall sit is, planks and 6 inches. And, if you talk about yielding isometrics with like dumbbell, I mean, we've all done is like where we're doing like a shoulder press and we're just keeping the one, and it's just like, okay, that's cool to get past sticking points, but they're not doing that. They're doing this specific style, and it seems that whenever practitioners do that and take it seriously, this weird type of strength ends up being the result. And so that's when I started to really get into it. I read articles from Jeff Lindsay. I've read and watched many a video on, I'm sure most people have, Bruce Lee. Really starting to go into the old time strongman, the Pioneer. Is also really loves overcoming isometric training, and so then I noticed the bar and chain, and then right around there, as I'm starting to, this is now over the course of a couple of years, then the company Dragon Door comes out with the ISO chain, and now successor to ISO Max, which is literally just focused on overcoming isometrics. And immediately I'm able to put two and two together on just how impactful and important it is to have measurable isometrics, because without it, do they still work? Sure. But then you run into issues like from the 1960s where Joe Weider was promoting his old school bar and chain device, and though people were getting results, it was kind of meteoric, but then it kind of faded just as fast because people knew they were getting strong, but they didn't really know how to quantify that, how to use progressive overload for that. And so it just died out. But yeah, that has got me excited for it. And I still am to this day.
Yeah, a lot of questions I have as you're going through that. And I mean, definitely want to talk on the data collection, isometrics towards the end. We start talking about practicality, because when I got the, messing with the ISO chain, ISO max, I got next thing right here, the ISO, what is this one? ISO chain color, you got the white color there. I loved it. I'm like, oh, I can see where this would be addicting. But then what started happening, I think I shared this in some of the earlier videos, was like, when I first started my videos, when I started talking about it, was like, there's almost too much information. And when there's too much, I like things really simple and kind of intuitive and kind of training by feel, and I love it. But then if I start thinking too much with numbers, I'm like, I started to overanalyze things, and it got me kind of paralysis by analysis. So I was thinking of like one or two or three different things, but then I'm like, I'll just freaking grab the just static straps and I'll just go to town on that. I'm just gonna go hard and I'll just do that. I don't need to quantify the stuff. Even though when I first bought it, I'm like, I could see the allure of tracking those metrics, kind of chasing those numbers, but it got into like, I'll ask that kind of towards the end, so I want to jump into that, but that was the problem I was having with that. You mentioned, I'll edit this a little bit, but there's something you talked about right at the end there when you were talking about, I want to start with this thing. Shoot, what did you just say? You were talking about Weider, isometrics, the history of isometrics.
Oh, and
I know what I was going to say. And I think with you, that I think might make people a lot more attracted to you is it's like in those old time strongman magazines, those guys were definitely, those guys were definitely in shape and they were jacked. But then you got some newer isometric stuff where it's more like these guys are like kind of like bending steel and doing stuff like freaks of nature type stuff like that, which is cool. But I think, and I'm sure, and I don't want to, don't quote me on that, but I'm sure you get this question a lot where people look at you and your physique. You got an awesome physique, obviously you're doing other things. People probably say, well, is this all you're doing? Are you just doing isometrics? And or how can we get those? It's one thing people say like, well, I want to be strong, isometric strong, but I visibly be able to having that payoff visually, like with hypertrophy and how that kind of trade off. Did you find your physique kind of change a lot the more you implemented isometrics?
Not so much. Because most of my physique came from bodybuilding and calisthenics, I haven't really noticed an aesthetic change, but I did notice a change in muscle density, like how dense it is still now. I feel like it could be better as like essentially the last 2 years of using the ISO chain, I've been limited by injuries, and now only recently have I really been able to train the way I've wanted to since 2020. So it's like kind of a 3 year later type thing. But yeah, aesthetically, not so much. Has it made a difference in my lifting? Oh, absolutely.
Towards like raw strength numbers, is that what you're saying?
Oh, yeah. Oh.
So to the general person listening, what kind of person do you think would benefit just from using isometrics? I'm sure it's a broad base, but just kind of the people you're kind of see approach you. And
so sometimes I hate to be the guy that says something like this because it's like, oh, he's just trying to sell it. And I promise you I'm not. But pretty much everyone can benefit from isometrics because it's really just part of a bigger whole. It's like we all need to move. So dynamic work is vital in our training. We need to move. We need flexibility training because if we don't, it leads to issues down the road. But then we also need isometric training as well as cardio as well. Heart is the most important muscle, but the isometric training is going to allow us to continue training into our old age because it's strengthening up the connective tissue. And usually what I've found, and I'm sure you might be able to say you've heard this from people that you know as well, are the guys and girls too, but mainly guys like, man, I used to lift heavy when I was young, and then now I'm able to have to do less and more reps because the joint, it's usually the joint every time they say it. And it's not to say this is like the magic solution, but it's going to drastically reduce the chances of those joint acute injuries like that happen.
have you found this is when I've shown it, sometimes people, usually it's like a minority, but some people have chimed in like, oh, isometrics they'll hurt your back. I mean, I think anything could potentially hurt you, but I've heard people, it's ironic because you hear people saying use isometrics if you have injuries and you can't do certain things, and then there's a whole group of people thinking that, well, if I do isometrics, I'm going to get injured because I'm fighting against an immovable object, and so therefore I'm going to like overexert myself or pull something. So what's your thoughts kind of on that?
That's a good question, man. So it essentially comes down to form. And, you know, if we were, let's say, for example, we got on the Isomax and we pulled deadlift with cat back form, we're going to have a big problem, you know, and it's funny because my issue was mainly lower back related because my glutes were weak. Among other things, it was a cascade of things, but mainly my glute was weak. So all that force was going right to my lower back because there was no cushion, you know, to absorb those forces. So as I was doing like Zercher squats and RDLs on Isomax, I kept getting into that same injury. I'm just like, what is going on? And then it would be, whether it be static or dynamic, it was just a weakness. So that was more of a muscle imbalance than anything with the posterior chain for me personally. But it's either going to come down to there's some type of weak link that needs to be worked on, whether it's for grip strength, form strength, posterior chain, or it's just form. But doing the exercise itself, that would be akin to both of us telling somebody never do deadlifts, even though deadlifts are an amazing exercise. If the form is right, it has incredible benefits for the body. So it kind of goes in the same thing there.
Nice. And I'm sure a lot of it has to do with like the programming and what you're doing. And this is probably a really loaded question. So I don't know how you want to answer this one, but we can kind of segue a little bit into kind of practical applications. But if you're thinking of, I want to take advantage of isometrics, I want to do isometrics. I got that isometrics manual. I forget the Dragon Door publication, the name of that book, but maybe it's called the isometrics manual. I forget.
It is, yeah.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah, it's awesome. It is a manual and it's fun to read that. But then again, you're reading, you're like, oh, there's so many options, and some are really simplistic, and some are like, okay, you go full effort. Some are like, it seemed like kind of halfish effort. Is there a right and wrong way? I guess it's a stupid question. It's probably not a right and wrong way. Maybe there probably is to do some things isometrics, but is there some, I guess, simple answers? I think about the easiest path to resistance. Well, I'll just grab the thing and try and go like as hard as I can. Versus how do I go 60%? I know you can do that. Maybe that's where you're getting into like why you like the ISO chain ISO max, because you can kind of do those percentages. But yeah, just practical applications to the general person about how to program and just full effort or semi-effort and the pros and cons of that. So I know it's a lot of stuff thrown at you, but
No, that's fine. So if somebody was essentially coming at this fresh, the manual actually states to, just because you're getting into it's a new training modality, to try 50%. So just kind of gauge it and just feel and not go all in at first. Once you start to get a feel for that, then you can start going into those maximum lifts. They have beginner programs that I honestly think are great, but to be honest, like I think the best program to do in the Isomax is Bob Hoffman's Super 8 from like the, was it 60s or whatever. It's the same thing that Bruce Lee did. It's like just 8 exercises, anterior chain, posterior chain, upper body, lower body, kind of covers all bases. 6 seconds, 20-second rest, probably take you about 8 minutes. And then from there, just using load mode and just trying to beat your number from before, because it sounds like you and I are the same, where it's just like, okay, that's cool that we have all that information, but let's just keep it simple, stupid, and just as long as we could just do these 8 exercises and just get better each time, that's really all that we need. That is really all you need. Yeah,
but then I start overthinking it, and again, I think we're all that beginner's mind and we have the advanced mind with stuff we kind of feel comfortable about. We can say, well, yeah, this is just simple. But if you're something new, like me getting into isometrics, that is still as it's new for me, I go back to that beginner mindset of like, well, I'm overthinking. Like, well, what if I go these 6 seconds, I do before or after, in the middle of the day or after the day? Like, it's going to interfere with my recovery. You know, if I'm going all out, because that Bob Hoffman one that's all out though, isn't it? Max effort.
All out. Yep.
So that's even something just talking about recovery. How did you found that? How do you incorporate that into your pre-existing, say, someone's basic bodybuilding strength split?
Okay, so if we're talking about adding that to an already existing program, what I've found is that it works a lot better doing it before. If someone's schedule really doesn't allow, and like, let's say it's like, this is the amount of time they have in the day to train, they can't be training at like 2 p.m. and then they train again at 7 p.m., then I would still do their, at least this style of isometric training right before the lift. Because it's so demanding and because it's at the higher end of the force velocity curve, we want to do the most exhausting things first. Kind of similar to how, like, if we were doing like a leg day, you don't want to do leg extensions and curls first. You want to do the squat first, and then do all the isolated movement stuff. It's kind of the same concept here. And, you know, I've actually done a trial by fire where I didn't have a choice. I was so busy that day, I had to do it last. And I was doing legs that day. My upper body numbers were just fine, but literally everything that was lower body, the numbers hit tank because I used up my energy. So, you know, it's better than doing nothing, but if you want like to really maximize your result, you want to do it first.
And then how about just adjusting the subtle variables of, like, let's say you got your, I forget that the Super 8 top of my head, like actually I totally forgot them, but I know it's in the book. But those 8 exercises, let's say like one of them was like bicep curl, bent over row or something like that. Do you adjust the certain setting, or you just stick consistently to what it is? Like, do you just find, like, let's say bicep curl, what angle are you going to pull at? Because all sorts of angles you could do the initial pull at. Is that something you kind of mess around with? Or if you're doing, let's say, that program, would you kind of stick to those set angles, just leave it where it is?
That's a great question. I would just leave it as is. For the 6 to 8 weeks, I change nothing. Like, it's literally just strap. Like, if it's the bicep curl, for example, strap 15, it stays strap 15 for 6 to 8 weeks.
Okay, cool. Let's get into this a little specifically. And I don't want to I'll put you on the spot too, because I know you got a good, and I don't, you probably wouldn't care, but I know you probably got a good relation with Dragon Door. Just, I mean, you're definitely the one pushing this stuff. Well, I won't get into it. I was going to talk about the difference between the ISO chain, ISO max, and like the battery thing and that stuff a little bit, but maybe you can touch on that. But what do you think is so awesome just about this tool and just so useful about this tool that people should pick this thing up? And then the other question I might have is, well, I'll just say it's a general thing, is I think this thing as an assessment tool is awesome. Because I think you as a trainer, any trainer, I wish this would be something everybody should have, because this is just something right away. I don't care what age you are. You got some awesome videos where it's like people on the street you bring this thing with. And everybody wants to see, like, oh, how hard can I pull? Even like I have my kids, I'll have all my kids. I have a young one who's like 3, or now she turns 3, and she even wanted to like yank on it just to see what the numbers were. So it's funny, it's contagious, and it's sometimes surprising. Like, you have a lot of your videos, the other guy doesn't look that strong, but just Jackson, I'm like, whoa. So it's interesting, but yeah, I guess what's unique and what's cool about the ISO chain, ISO max, and do you have a preference of one versus another?
Okay, so let's talk about the preference first. I think that the Isomax is essentially superior in just about every way. I had reservations about the base plate and the chain at first, because I really liked how wide the ISO chain base plate is. The warping though sucks. It's not really a big deal in the grand scheme of things, but once you start pulling over like 600, I know this isn't really applicable to everyone, but I mean, it's kind of like, we paid for this, so you kind of expect it not to do that. But as far as like the actual functional applications of that, it's still, the integrity is still fine. The chains are kind of clunky, still effective, but, it makes a lot of noise. I've ticked off my girlfriend a couple nights, with that. But the strap is great. I really like that everything's numbered now. It's just a lot easier to go through a session with the Isomax. The rechargeable battery is great. The display is a little bit brighter, which I like. But really, when it comes to like why someone should purchase, so just so everyone knows then, so I am an affiliate with Dragon Door. So if somebody goes to our YouTube channel and they click on the link, I do get a percentage paid. That being said, I do like to even play devil's advocate with the Isomax, because I've told many people on the channel, go buy your own, go make your own from Home Depot for about $45 to $50. Here's the materials. I give them a list. And then, like you can do just like the 1960s versions, which still works. But what really sells the Isomax isn't just the dynamometer. The dynamometer is great. The fact that you can see the force readout in real time does absolutely everything for your training. It's really just the extra features, like the time mode, the load mode. Average mode is kind of wonky, I'll be honest. But also the max, setting the seconds, setting it for a time, all those extra variables that we can use for progressive overload. The main issue that the 1960s version had is now eliminated. So it makes like training isometrics like legit. Like you can actually go somewhere with it and not just use it and then have it collect dust for like a couple decades. You know what I mean? So that's why I'd recommend it. I've actually had people get the equipment at Home Depot and just buy the bar itself, and it still works for them. So if they want to cut, costs and such. But so far for me, whether I've been an affiliate or not, if I weren't, I've definitely got my money and then some from it. Honestly, the fact that my knees are the way they are right now has just, I've been singing this product praises for about 3 years now because of that alone.
Do you know anybody who's just, I'm sure you maybe do heard of it, but like just people that are doing like isometrics alone, like just standalone, just that's all they're doing. They're not lifting. I mean, it'd be nice to lift some dynamic weight, but that's for whatever reason, maybe they choose to, or they got injuries, that this is just, they just do isometrics.
They just do that, yeah. Do I know some?
Yeah, do you know, just had clients or anyone who's just like that? I've just pretty much isometrics is essential part of their workouts.
Yeah, so I actually trained some clients that are out of state online. We have a Zoom call just like this, and they just have the Isomax. So they book in sessions with me. When the session's done, it's like 30 minutes. I mean, they are dripping. And they it's mainly the reason why they like it is mainly because they're kind of afraid of, like we had talked about earlier, like injuries, essentially acute injuries, from just the muscle being overloaded at a weird angle. And they're just like, I really like this because, we're stuck at the, I don't have to really worry so much about the chances of getting injured. You can still get hurt with literally any training method, but just the chances are a lot lower with this. And then they feel safer because I'm a trainer, so I'm literally watching their form and setting them up before they go lift at 100% on the isomax. And what's really cool about that is, like, now diet aside and cardio aside, if we're talking about weight loss, that's kind of a different thing. But I've had my clients, come back to me, their doctors are telling them that they're like, whoa, what are you doing? Your bone density is up, your connective tissue is looking great, your muscles are denser, like, what are you doing, what's going on? And then they tell them, and they're just like, oh, that's weird, and it's, but it all ends up working out in the end. Now I do tell them, like, that isometrics, though it can be used as a standalone, they even talked about that in the manual, I do think that it's part of a bigger whole, which is just, like we had talked about, strength training, cardio, flexibility, and isometrics. But I do mention that to them, but we primarily focus on the isometrics. I don't know if I was like kind of
no, that's perfect. Because that's I'm thinking of people, like, they might just have a preference in, like, you get resistance training, just an average, let's just say someone who's like 50 and older, and they're like, well, I gotta do some resistance training. You're just finding a preference, like even the total gym stuff that I'm sitting on, some people gravitate towards that because it's, for whatever reason, I think it's easier or whatever, they like it. It's less wear and tear in their joints, what they'll say. So they might just have a preference of using something like this. And I think of even like my parents, even, or people that are older that don't feel like going to the gym, they don't feel like doing traditional weightlifting. And when I first started hearing about this, I was a bad salesman because I didn't really push it too hard, but I could see where if you told someone, they were somewhat convinced that you're telling me I could get some good resistance training just out of doing flexed holds, bent, just a few positions. I mean, it's better than nothing. But I could see for a person who's kind of limited in their mobility and what they can do, that something like this will be really useful for that population.
Yes.
So that's what I thought would be something cool. Just that's something I try to recommend. I always think I never would have thought of, but for a lot of people, like, oh, I can rig up some bands, or I can, especially when it's an obese client, there's always so much stuff that they can comfortably kind of do with resistance training. Right. That also isn't just like boring, or whatever. And that goes for any age, whatever limitation you got. But this seems like something, it's really supposed to be simplistic. You're getting immediate feedback. So that alone is kind of can push you. So I think that was a cool feature about it. How do you feel about other stuff? If I can reach it, I will. But just some other, this is like, I know this is isokinetics. Have you heard of this isokinetor thing?
Yeah. I've had people talk about that.
It's funky. Well, I noticed when you start talking isometrics on YouTube, you get I got all sorts of recommendations of things. Oh, check out this, check out that. But I don't know if there's any other like tools or things that you've just messed around with, since, again, you're in that isometrics guru phase right now. So
yeah. So that's what that looked like. I've heard of it. I've never actually seen it.
Yeah, I always say it looks kind of like there's the alien in the Alien movies. I forget what it's called. It's called something, but it looks like that thing is gonna jump on your face.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty crazy. I don't know if I would really call it isometrics. You hold something and you gotta do this range of motion type stuff.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so like self-resistance.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. You have to keep a constant resistance, and then you kind of go through a certain range of motion. This thing's pretty crazy. I mean, it's a nutty thing. I definitely, if I were you, reach out to the company, because I think you'd be a good representative for it. They're based out of Germany, but I think you'd be cool to check it out. So anyways, I digress, but just different modes of isometrics. So maybe we'll wrap up kind of just talking about maybe just like, what is how would you yourself kind of incorporate isometrics in the grand scheme of things for someone who has, not the stereotype everybody, but just stereotypical goals, let's say male, female, but let's say someone who wants to obviously have lower body fat, increase muscle mass, incorporate isometrics. What does kind of a somewhat of an ideal scenario kind of look like for somebody?
So essentially, so that's like our typical client who wants to gain some muscle mass. So what I would do in that situation is I would probably keep them primarily dynamic, and I would have them do honestly what I'm doing, which is like a 10-minute isometric session. Is quick, easy. You see the numbers, you document it, and you just go on to the next. So what it would probably look like is if we were to have a session with that type of client, we start our session, first 10 minutes, isometrics, document the numbers, go into the dynamic stuff. So whether it's calisthenics, weightlifting, whatever, do that. And then I'd have them end the session with cardio and a stretching session. They literally just hit all four. And that's a complete workout right there. That's what I would do for that type of client.
Nice. And just for you personally, I mean, you've been going at this for a while. I mean, you got a really hyper-focused channel on all this content. It's awesome. Does it, and this was maybe the problem I had practically, is that I started to get, maybe because I'm just a simple-minded person, I got kind of bored after a while. I'm like, I'm doing it, but then after a while, I'm like, I think it's just, again, probably time. I got limited time to squeeze stuff in. And so I will incorporate it if I feel like I'm seeing a big trade-off. And I think that's obviously something you're saying it does happen if you put the effort in. But yeah, how do you just kind of maintain like just your interest in just this thing? Do you enjoy there's kind of a couple of options, just practically how do you implement it without being bored? And just, I mean, on a professional, you're talking about isometrics so much, does it get to be a little much, or do you not mind it? This is kind of more personal question, maybe not.
No, it's fine. I don't mind it because it's always been interesting to me, just to see what was really behind like pound for pound strength, and I really feel like this is it. I could be wrong about that, but as far as like keeping interest, so your viewers are probably gonna have like a little bit of a chuckle here, but the Isomax has a very nerdy similarity to something in an anime called Dragon Ball Z.
So really?
It does, and every time I do it, it just reminds me of it. And I've always loved that show as a kid. It's honestly one of the reasons I started lifting when I was 19. And so like it kind of just gets me like revved up. Like as soon as I turn the thing on, I kind of like have that mental thing where I just do like the correlation. I'm just like, yo, let's go, let's get it. But as far as that, the other thing is what keeps me motivated is like I really just don't want to go back to that place where I had the pain. Like it's hard to really explain, but like every time I did some type of squat or lunge, my left knee, it just felt like there was a lightning bolt going through it, and I really thought I needed surgery. I really did. But it just, I don't know, man. It just freaking helped. And I like same thing with like skull crushers. I couldn't do it. It would just be my left one specifically. I could have the form on point, and like any type of acute bending like that was just a no-go, and just it's gone. And so like now it's just like a fear of that pain coming back. So you do the work so that it doesn't come back. It's kind of like that. So it's those two things that keeps me motivated, and then the nerdy thing keeps me motivated. But yeah, you know, I guess a third thing would be to see the correlation in the weight room. You know, I'm moving the most weights I ever have. There is some things that I've just never done. I'm 33, you know, so I just like, I can see it because I know that was the X factor because I wasn't doing that before. So I guess those would be my three main points that I would tell you.
Awesome. Very cool. Those are all the main things I got, unless there's something else you want to share with everybody. I definitely want to, any kind of final thoughts, let me know, but then definitely let everyone know where you can find you. I'll be plugging the YouTube channel. I'm sure a lot of my viewers already do watch your channel because I get a lot of stuff. You know, people have been asking for a while to talk to Chris, and I'm like, I'm trying to talk to him. But yeah, so awesome to have this connection. But yeah, so where can everybody find you? And then any other kind of just parting thoughts, maybe practical things for you to consider, maybe you're just hearing this for the first time.
Sure. So you guys can find me, my TikTok is NoLimitSquad89. My channel is NoLimitSquad on YouTube. My Instagram is NoLimitChris, CHRYS. I know it's weird. And if I had to give any piece of advice, I would tell you that if you really are looking to lift long term and you're looking for a full realm of fitness where you want to be able to lift well into your old age and not really have to worry about that stuff, you should really look at isometrics more seriously. One of the things that even I fell into before, and it's not that, you know, It's because of my ignorance. I just had the lack of knowledge. I just thought that isometrics were kind of like not a gimmick, but just like a low level thing. And like, you know, bodybuilding and stuff is where it's at, because obviously bodybuilding works. Just look at, you know, some of the top tier. But then it's like once you really go into the knowledge, you kind of realize, you know, the major aspect of things. I would tell them, if you're gonna look at isometrics, take it seriously. I take isometrics as seriously as I weight lift. You know, I keep my form on point, and when I do a lift, I go 100%. So that's what I would recommend.
Nice. And obviously you're talking a lot about iso chain, iso maxes. So, you know, definitely check out, you know, if they're going to get some, I say definitely check out your affiliate links. That helps you out. And, you know, I think somebody has, if, you know, content creators who will think about that stuff, you know, we don't charge stuff, but if, you know, if you're getting a lot of information on how to use isometrics, how to use the iso chain, iso max, obviously they're getting it from you. It definitely makes sense, you know, pick it up from you. So I'll definitely put your link or something down below for that. So just send me that over my way. I'll definitely do that. So great talking to you, man. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mike. I'm so glad we were able to do this.
Yeah, awesome.